We're good to go. All right, it is the Lex and Pete show. We got a throwback for it. It's the Lex Pinz and Pete show edition this week. It is Thursday night. We are recording. We are ready to go to talk about one thing and one thing only. It is the big three-team trade that just went down this past week between Slippery Pete, our own, the Zits, and the Bussy Boys. We'll get into that in a second after a brief word from our sponsors. As always, Sundog Multimedia. That is at Sundog_multimedia on Instagram. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. They were once just a personal tool that has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to build a modern, yet nimble, social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional principles. And one more thing, Sundog Multimedia is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow them on Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Moving, muscle for hire, assembly, errands, you name it, they will do it. Easy peasy is a multi-service team. If you need something, just ask. All right. I believe this is our first, or no, because we've done some mock draft episodes, I guess, right? Pete, we did
one
on mock draft.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, our second or third off-season episode, but I feel like it's actually maybe the first episode of the new season now that the trade market has been opened up. Of course, that is exactly why we're on here. We want to talk about one thing and one thing only. That is the three-team steamer, as they're calling it, that went down between Slippery Pete, the Bussy Boys, and the Zits. This seems like it's starting to become somewhat of a yearly tradition. And I will just say, from my perspective as an owner of a team and also a commissioner, specifically, I actually say the commissioner, is that we all see it, all right? We moved up the trade thing for 2 weeks, right? Because we wanted to get it right after the Super Bowl or whatever. It was originally going to be 2 weeks after the Super Bowl. We'd start trading. My perspective was that the league season doesn't start until March 15th anyways. That's trades, free agency. Pretty much nothing can really go on between the Super Bowl and March 15th. Obviously, guys can get cut. But besides that, nobody's joining a team. Even Derek Carr, he can't make any signing until the 15th. But that's neither here nor there. Slippery Pete, he's been on my ass for months, maybe years at this point, always trying to get the trades moved up, maybe abolish the trade deadline. He's always looking to trade, right? So I was kind of promised trades as soon as we opened up everything. And I forget what the exact date was, but it was Monday, 9 a.m., maybe like 9:05, because I didn't set an alarm. The Monday after the Super Bowl, we opened it up. Nothing's going on, right? I think what 1.5 weeks went by until we finally got this trade. And I will say, I guess it did deliver. I guess that's what we were all waiting for. But as I was saying, as commissioner, right, Pete would be up my ass with all these messages. Bowen would be like subtly throwing jabs from the outside, and Simcoe would be liking the messages. I saw it. I knew exactly who was behind this push. I knew that Pete was the mouthpiece of that all. I know that Simcoe and Bowen are not innocent in this either. They were just using Pete as a puppet, as they usually do. But you know what? They got what they wanted after a week and a half. We finally got a trade. So let's talk about it. Starting with Simcoe, he gives Josh Jacobs, DJ Moore, and Kyle Pitts. And in return, he gets Dameon Pierce, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, a 2024 first rounder from Slippery Pete, a 2024 second rounder from McMorrow. Bowen gives Jonathan Taylor, Dameon Pierce, Deebo Samuel, and in return, he gets Josh Jacobs, DJ Moore, the third overall pick in this year's rookie draft, and Slippery Pete's 2024 second rounder. And Slippery Pete gives 1-3, Slippery Pete's 2024 first rounder, McMorrow's 2024 first rounder, and Slippery Pete's 2024 second rounder. In return, he gets Jonathan Taylor and Kyle Pitts. I guess we'll start with Pete. And right now I ask that both myself and George, we give Pete the floor. Even if we want to mute ourselves, we can. I just want to hear Pete's side of the story. I don't want to hear his reaction to what Bowen got or how Simcoe made out in the trade. I just want to hear Pete's perspective, how that trade went down, and how he's feeling about what he got for what he gave up and the future of his team. And then we'll get to his reactions on the other teams in a little bit. So, Pete, I will also mute myself. I see George already has himself muted. I'm not going to give you a clock. I feel like if you start to run long, I may step in, and then we can move on. But for now, I'm going on mute, and the floor is yours.
I guess first I'll just say happy Sunday evening. I mean, a Sunday evening trade market open on the Dynasty mic with Pinz and Pete featuring, or with Lex and Pete featuring Pinz. It's a great Sunday evening. So I'm happy. I'm bringing positive vibes to this call. I love what we're about to do here. I am a little skeptical of the attitude and energy George is bringing to the call. I texted him before this and I said, George, are you bringing positive energy to the call? And he said no. So that's pretty good reason to be a little concerned on the energy he's bringing, but that remains to be seen. The trade. Looking back on this trade, without talking about Simcoe's team or Bowen's team, we're just talking about my team. Talks have been going on for a while. The vision was to always move multiple first-round picks that we had gathered over the last year and a half for proven talent. A lot of skepticism during the rebuild was like, Pete, you think you got to hit on these picks. You got to hit on these picks. You have 10 first-round picks. Everyone assuming I'm going to take the picks. I think on multiple shows I said, just because I have the picks doesn't mean I'm taking the picks. These picks are non-depreciating assets. I'm taking the picks. What I do with them is up to me. The vision was to always move for proven talent. And we saw that at the beginning of the deadline last year when I moved 2 first for CD Lamb. This just goes hand in hand with the vision there, moving the first round picks for proven talent. That's what we wanted to do. I broke down this trade into Pete's red flags and Pete's green flags. So let's talk about Pete's red flags. For me, this trade all comes down to CJ Stroud, the 1-3 CJ Stroud. I gave up 1.3, the QB2 of this draft, which for me is CJ Stroud, with a very unproven, unsolidified quarterback room. You've got Deshaun Watson, who looked like absolute garbage outside of one game last season, hasn't played football in a year and a half. Sure, he was QB5 back-to-back seasons on the Texans before his whole thing. But we don't know if that's still Deshaun or if it's the new Deshaun or if it's the old Deshaun or anywhere in between. And then I've got 1.2, which is going to be Bryce Young. So that's the biggest red flag on this trade. Is I gave up the QB2 in this draft, which I think is CJ Stroud, with a very unproven quarterback room in a super flex dynasty league. It's a huge red flag. Huge red flag. But I guess that speaks to my confidence in Deshaun Watson and Bryce Young. I'll keep the other red flags quick. I have little to no depth now. I'm heavily invested in running back, which is the position with the lowest shelf life in dynasty. Kyle Pitts and JT are both coming off out of surgery of major injuries from last year. Deshaun Watson is the old Deshaun, is the new Deshaun, we don't know. 24 first I gave up could both be top 6, 24. Both could be top 6 picks in the 24 draft. Could possibly be Marvin Harrison Jr. Could possibly be, probably not Caleb Williams, but maybe could be Drake May. Could be Brock Bowers. Some people are saying, Pete, why not just take Brock Bowers? He's in the 24 draft. He's probably going to be up there for one of those picks. And then the last criticism, I think, is you could have waited for this pick to be Stroud. Maybe I didn't have to give up as much around the side, like Calvin Ridley in the second, to move that 1-3-4 Jonathan Taylor. I could have waited, but I saw my chance and I took it. The green flags for Pete. 7 of 9 starters. 7 of 9 of my starters now fall in the top 2 rounds of average startup draft positions. That means if we were to startup draft right now, 7 of 9 of my starters would go in the first 2 rounds of the startup draft. That's insane. The average age of my 9 starters, 23 years old. Not only that, can't really say that I sold out and went all in. I own first, second, and third round picks in 24, 25, and 26. But I'm not really saying I'm all in. Didn't really sell out my picks. I own 1 through 3 in the next 3 years. I think I bought Pitts and JT at probably their lowest value since coming into the league, both for about 2 firsts each. 2 firsts for 24 for Pitts and like a second, and then 1.3 and like Calvin for JT. So I view it as moving 2 firsts for both of them, for each of them, probably at their lowest value since they came into the league. That's pretty much what I had for red flags and green flags. How it went down, I would say, last point here. I've been individually negotiating with Simcoe and Bowen for multiple months. Bowen moving JT for the 1-3. We talked about this for months on end. Bowen needed another piece. He was probably waiting me out, wasn't budging. Probably because he knew he had time. Who knows? Maybe he does move JT for 1-3 straight up once it does become Stroud. But adding a second or Calvin Ridley wasn't a huge overpay or wasn't a huge deal to me there. Again, individually negotiating for Kyle Pitts. Simcoe really didn't want to move Kyle Pitts. He said right up front I was going to have to wow him to get him. But I wanted Pitts and I made my move for him. So I was okay giving those 224 firsts and the second to make it happen. Individually, it wasn't going to happen. I offered JT in the I offered 1-3 in a second for JT, didn't work. I offered 224 first and a second for Pitts, didn't work. I kind of knew I was going to have to put this together, be like a 3-teamer to make it happen. So once we started talking 3-team trade, the wheels started turning. The interesting part is we went to a huge standstill. Huge standstill. It was over. It was a wrap. We said, hey, we gave it a good effort this year. Good try, boys. That was that. And then from the clouds, from the absolute clouds, Bowen adds the Debo Samuel for DJ Moore swap. That was not a part of the trade. Wasn't even close to a part of the trade. We didn't even mention those names. The trade was close. We all needed like one little bit of a piece. I wanted a Simcoe's 24 first instead of my 24 first, or Simcoe wanted Jerry Jeudy instead of Calvin Ridley. Back and forth for hours. We said it was at a standstill. And then out of nowhere, Bowen came in and was like, guys, I got it. And then just added the Debo for DJ swap between him and Simcoe. That caught me by surprise. I had no idea. Like after that came into the play here, I knew it was a smash except for Simcoe. It almost so that made me want to renegotiate my side because I didn't think Simcoe was going to pass up the deal if I tried to like replay those 24 first to be like a Simcoe 24 first instead of a McMurrow or mine. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. When individually both of them brought it together, we had a standstill, and then Bowen added that Debo and DJ Moore piece to it out of nowhere, and then it went through.
George, we'll pass it over to you. I just want your general reactions. First, we'll go maybe general reactions to everything Pete said, and then we can just get into your overall thoughts on the trade in general and bring in both teams to talk about them as well. But right now, what's your reaction to Pete's opening statements? It's been about 2 hours.
I was a lot. All right.
Starting to feel like the State of the Union there for a little bit.
I gotta open a window. Hold on.
Pete's falling apart right now. We're 10 minutes into the show.
Well, he's fired up. He just got that off. You can tell that
I got that off,
internally. Man. He's feeling pretty hot right now. He's probably sweating. He's got that sweatshirt on. So,
listen, I think that I've been one of Pete's biggest critics of his rebuild or lack thereof or whatever he's doing. I think, my opinions of his dynasty abilities and all of that is well documented. But I'll say that, he has positioned himself to take swings, and that's what he's done. He's taken a couple of swings. I would never have traded for Kyle Pitts. I think that's a bad move. And I wouldn't have traded for Jonathan Taylor. I think both of those are bad moves in terms of, but that's my opinion. I wouldn't have done it. Obviously, Simcoe made out like a bandit. He came in and he got a wide receiver 1. He got another wide receiver 1. He got a 4 RB2. And then he got multiple first-round draft picks. And then he sent an aging running back that's looking for a second contract and basically the worst 5th overall pick in recent memory for all of that. And so when you look at it, obviously Simcoe makes out like a bandit, but slipped despite the fact that he traded for Jonathan Taylor and Pitts. Those are two guys. They're obviously iffy. Like he said, he bought low because they are low right now. He does not come out looking the worst in this trade. It's easily Bowen. I don't even know why Bowen. My note on Bowen was, why did he even participate? That was the line that I had for Bowen in this trade. I'm not sure how this helps him, what he was thinking, why he would give up Debo Samuel in a team that literally has basically come out since the Super Bowl and been like, we don't really care who plays quarterback because all we do is get the ball to our weapons and let them cook. And we're just going to double down on that. He's already locked up and paid. And then he traded his prime young running back, who, like I said, I have question marks on, but certainly wouldn't trade a running back that's in his rookie contract that has far fewer years for the older version of that same running back. That's a bruising type running back looking for a second contract. I think that it's pretty likely that Josh Jacobs' peak season was last year, and that he basically only diminishes from here. And unless he's Derrick Henry, unless he just traded for Derrick Henry, then that won't be the case. So I think if you're looking at it from a winners and losers standpoint, I think Pete comes out kind of net neutral. I think, you know, it makes sense that he would take a swing with those picks for those type guys. Bowen, why did you participate in this trade? That feels just kind of like trade fever, and then Simcoe makes out like a bandit.
Thank you, George. Pete, I ask you to remain on mute, and then I'll just give my brief statement, and then we'll open the floor up for your reaction, and then lead that into just general discussion on everything that's been said since you have last spoken. I feel like we're fairly all on the same page here. I don't think that I'm adding too much to the conversation. Maybe just like some little notes on some different things. I agree with George where I look at this trade and I do wonder why Bowen participated. I feel like all three of these owners, as I was saying in my opening speech, were just very eager. I think that this is a trade that did not have to be made right now. I think that all three of these guys just got locked in and they kind of got tunnel vision on one thing, and they needed to have this happen to get their fix. And I don't think this was a trade that had to happen now. I don't know if this was necessarily the best use of assets. And you can make that argument for all three teams. I'm not going to specifically talk about one team when I say that. I just feel like maybe shopping around, there could have been some more interesting things. I just feel like a lot of teams weren't really I accidentally muted myself, but I feel like a lot of teams weren't looking to make deals right now. And instead of just waiting that out, like I know I've been in talks, and just some teams aren't looking to make any trades until at least free agency starts, because there's a lot of guys that are, you know, a lot of running backs now that are hitting the market per se, right? And you know, with the picks, they want to maybe see how the combine goes out, so they don't want to move these picks yet, and just things like that. So I feel like these are just the three teams that were actively looking to get into a trade right now. I know I've been shopping around, but these were three teams that wanted to do it, and they just made sure it happened. And I think that it kind of shows in all aspects of the trade, right? I think that it was a good trade for some teams, but I think that all around it was kind of imperfect, right? So I think that I've said it before. I think that trades are supposed to be win-win. I think that some teams in our league look at it like you have to rip these teams off. You have to get the better of a team in a deal for it to be a win, but both teams can get what they want out of a trade. And in this case, three teams can win this trade. I think that early on, Simcoe has won immediately. Right. He got rid of Josh Jacobs, who, like George was saying, he's an aging running back looking for a second contract. Now, Jacobs is still 24, I believe. So it's not like he's turning 27, 28, but we know what happens once running backs get on those second contracts. A lot of times it can be a little bloated on the payroll, that type of thing. But he got rid of Josh Jacobs. That's the definition of selling high. This was a guy that was always a low-key RB1, finishing like 10 through 12, something like that. And then, you know, all of a sudden he puts up this RB3 season, RB2 season right behind Austin Eckler. So this is the definition of selling high. You got rid of this guy after he put up a top 2 season in a contract year. It's tough to have that repeat. So he sold him high. DJ Moore has just been like a constant thorn in his side, finishing wide receiver 20, always talking about that upside. And then Pitts, there's just a lot of discussion to be had around these tight ends, right? And whether it's worth investing in a tight end like this, if Pitts is the guy that you want to invest in. And in return, he got a good running back, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley coming back, and he got 2 first-rounders out of that. I just think that that's an insane return. Right away, I don't think that there's a way that this can go bad for Simcoe. He's already won the trade. Pete can win the trade this year. And it's still a dynasty move. These are all young guys that can't be made. The one thing I worry about with Pete is that maybe he over-consolidated his assets a little bit. I always thought that was the right move for him. I thought that, you know, my thing was always that, you know, the more picks you make, the more likely you are to miss out. And, you know, because like, you know, people are just banking on all these good picks and everything like that. And there are going to be bad draft classes. Guys aren't going to pan out. So it's like, I thought Pete did have to consolidate these assets, turn them into players. That's obviously what I like to do with my team anyway. So of course I agree with that. I feel like maybe he over consolidated just a tiny bit though. He gave up a lot for Taylor and Pitts. We're talking about Taylor and Pitts as being buy lows. And I agree that the perception of them isn't really high. I don't think the price that he paid for them was necessarily a discount though. That's still a pretty hefty price tag on these two guys. He still paid a premium for it. Maybe he got like a slight discount, but I didn't really view this as a buy low for Pete. I felt like this was him buying them at cost, if not even paying up a little bit more just to get his guys. So now he does have a really scary looking lineup in theory, right? If these guys hit their ceilings, this could be a team that runs the league for a few years, if not more, especially with some good quarterback play. So I think that Pete, he made a good trade. I think this is a good move for him. He went all in without, hindering himself with like age or anything like that. So he's got a good young team, high ceiling, but it's also a ceilings that we haven't necessarily seen yet. So it's to be seen. I think it's a good move for Pete. It's what he wanted to do. I can't hate it too much, but there is obviously the risk of this not working out, and he got rid of a lot of depth, and that could be the death of the division. We will see. Bowen, I don't want to be too mean. He sold Taylor at, he felt like he really wanted to get rid of him. I just didn't agree with throwing in Debo there. Debo's only 27, and people act like these 27-year-old wide receivers are like, 50 years old entering the retirement home. Debo Samuel is still going to be a top 10 guy as long as he stays healthy. And of course, he's dealt with some injuries and stuff like that. But I just didn't think I didn't agree with him, especially hearing from Pete what happened and throwing in Debo like that. Giving up Debo and getting a guy like DJ Moore, who I know Bowen loves, but I just don't see it with him yet. Of course, maybe he will get that big quarterback play, new coaching, and things will come together for him. But it's all going to come down to CJ Stroud. That's who I'm assuming he's going to take at 1-3. Just to close it up and then get it to the general discussion. Bowen could shut all of us up if whoever he takes at 3 pans out. I'm assuming it's Stroud. And my one thing about it is that he better know who he's going to take, because if he made this trade right now and made this big move for that 3rd overall pick and just said, yeah, I'll take whatever the best quarterback is at that spot there, and he's not locked into a guy, that would have me a bit concerned. That's what this all hinges on for him. If that quarterback that he takes pans out and gives him good quarterback play for the next 10 years, then, he probably won the trade. But right now, I think that he gave up way too much for, a little bit of a risky move. So let's all come off mute, everybody. Pete, let's get back to you real quick. Any reactions to our reactions on your trade? And then we'll open the floor and hear what you have to say about Simcoe and Bowen sides as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to say Bowen lost this trade. It's very easy to say it right now. But KB, I agree with you. It comes down to Stroud. Like, as long as Deshaun Watson and Bryce Young maintain a better dynasty quarterback standing than CJ Stroud, I think I win this trade. As soon as Stroud goes above Young or Watson, that's when it becomes a problem, because I don't have the depth at quarterback. I mean, I do got Howell and Trask, but I don't have the depth at quarterback. So it comes down to CJ Stroud, I think, when it comes down to who won and lost a trade between me and Bowen. I don't see how Simcoe comes out of this a loser. The Debo and DJM swap was just wild. Like, after that got tossed into it, you mentioned that, selling high on Josh Jacobs. Like, I don't think Simcoe loses this trade. George, I am surprised to hear that you're not a Kyle Pitts guy. I think my trade does come down a lot, like if you believe in Kyle Pitts or not. Obviously had the 1,000-yard season as a rookie, but had no touchdowns. This year, I throw away this year because of the quarterback play. Doesn't look like he's going to get much better quarterback play, but guy's only 22. I was going back the last 5 seasons. There's only 5 tight ends that have had 1,000 yards receiving, between Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Waller, and Pitts. So I bought Pitts for 2 firsts here. I'm fully in that he's going to be a perennial league winner for the next 8 years, to get to that kind of Kelsey Andrews status. That's what I'm expecting. That is a position where you can get an advantage over the other teams in the league because of how scarce it is. And Pitts was my guy, so I was kind of fine for overpaying for him, but I don't really think I overpaid for him. I paid for 2 firsts for him. I'm looking at what Kyle Pitts in 2024. I'm not gonna be able to get 2 firsts back for him. I think I can. 2025, I still think I can. So same kind of thing with Jonathan Taylor too. I still think next year I can get 2 firsts back for Jonathan Taylor if I need to. So I kind of viewed it as, yes, I'm buying into talent, buying into proven NFL talent at a low cost that I feel like I'm confident I can get back in. But again, that depends on how much you believe in Kyle Pitts and Jonathan Taylor.
Well, I'll say, look at it this way, right? So you're saying that you bought Kyle Pitts for what?
I think I bought them both for an average of 2 first round picks. Between 1-3 Calvin in the second, that's 2 firsts, and then the 2 firsts.
Okay, so because I'm also just looking at it, so I have his player profile pulled up, right? And I'm looking at my trade from when I traded Pitts to Simcoe, right? So I traded Pitts, and I got what, the 1-2,
right?
I got the second pick of the second round,
Right.
And then I got Bowen's second round pick in 2020, or the second. Okay, no. 2022 first. So I got 1-2. I got
2-1.
Bowen's second rounder in 2022, and then I got your second rounder in 23. So in this upcoming draft,
Which is 2-1.
so do you feel like that, like where do you feel like that balances out compared to what you gave up for Pitts?
Yeah, I mean, you gave up 2-1 or 1-2 on the clock. Like this, you bought that, a month before the draft, probably around this time. I'm paying 1-3. Like you got to look at it. 1-3 was for Jonathan Taylor. 1-3 and JT. That was always the talks between me and Bowen.
Yeah.
The 224 first was always the talks between me and Simcoe. The only negotiation was like, what am I adding to 1-3, or is it going to be Calvin Ridley or just Jerry Jeudy for Simcoe? So
yeah,
I mean, you paid 1-2 right before the draft, and then 2-1 and another
April
second.
27th.
Yeah, 2-1 and another second.
Yeah,
I paid 2 firsts that are a year plus out. So I don't know. I guess they're kind of comparable. I mean, the only difference is I gave up Calvin Ridley, who has, one number one season under him, but hasn't played football in 2 years. Got a lot of hype right now, but I'm not too convinced in a 27-year-old wide receiver that hasn't played football in 2 years. So yeah, I don't know. It depends how much you believe that Jonathan Taylor and Kyle Pitts are going to come back and be those tight end 1, RB1 that they were in 2021. I knew I wasn't going to be like the big favorite of this trade because those guys haven't performed in a year. But yeah, it depends how much you believe in those two players, and then it comes down to if Stroud pans out and becomes, a better quarterback than Young and Watson for me.
yeah. My argument or my point really was just that, as I was saying, like I just don't feel like this was necessarily buying them low. I just feel like you were just buying them at cost, and just because your perception was low, I don't really think that Bowen was necessarily selling him low when you look at what Bowen got in return, right? And then I don't think that Pitts really got sold for cheap either. Like I think that you could argue Simcoe either broke even or arguably made a profit off of what he got Pitts for. So it's like I just feel like a lot of people were maybe looking at your trade as like, oh well, he just got them for cheap. But I don't necessarily view it as that. I think he just got them for what they cost.
That's fair. That's fair. Maybe a slight discount.
But George?
No, I think you made a couple of really good points. I think one, that we got to move the age for receivers back. It's 31 now when you should start thinking about these guys as old. If you look at the top finishes this year, Tyreek Hill 28, Devontae Adams 29, Stephon Diggs 29, and then you have your young guys CD, AJ Brown. If you look last year, it was Cooper Kupp 28, and then Devontae, and then Diggs. Debo was in there. So yeah, I mean, these guys are the top guys in the league right now. They just are continuing to perform well into their 27 plus years. So I definitely think that adding in Debo, that's kind of the nail in the coffin. And then I'm a big who's the quarterback guy. And DJ Moore just doesn't have a quarterback. And I can't get behind wide receivers that don't have quarterbacks. And I know that DJ Moore is supposed to have he's just gonna have a perennial breakout, like he's gonna be 28 years old and they're gonna be like, this is DJ Moore's breakout year. It's not coming, it's not gonna arrive. I will say, as you guys were talking, I haven't softened on I hate Kyle Pitts. Like I despise Kyle Pitts. I wouldn't want him on my team. But I do think that in terms of what he paid for him, I do think that the Calvin Ridley perception is an interesting piece of this trade to keep your eye on, because I think if you just look at it from a names perspective, you go, this is a haul. And it has, still has the potential to be, but I think it is possible that Calvin Ridley, one, is just denied reinstatement, at which point, this whole entire trade flips. And then two, you just got to see how he integrates into that Jaguars offense. And if he can just bounce right back, especially with the wide receiver talent in the league. It's very hard to just break in and then become, a top 12 wide receiver when it feels like the top 5 or 6 are locked every single year. And so you're kind of competing for that, 6 through 12 spot, but there are still some really good wide receivers in that field. So I think that's a super interesting point of how does this Calvin Ridley thing end up panning out? That might help Pete a good amount. I think he probably got away with actually not having to give up Jeudy if that was the case. And that's a pretty good situation for him. And then I think Jonathan Taylor, I think it's about how you view him. I view him more now kind of in that RB2 category, your high end RB2 category. But I think even just shoring that up at that position is good. I think obviously you pay the price at 1.3. That's kind of high for him, but If you're able to shore up a solid, wider running back 2 for that spot, then that's pretty good. I did want to ask you one question, Kieran. Do you think that Bowen and Pete essentially committed themselves to having to make a trade prior to when the real deadline or when the real trade openings would have started, and that's kind of what pushed this move forward instead of waiting until things like free agency or things like the draft to happen before making this trade?
Actually, I mean, and I did see Pete just nod, but I don't really think so. I don't think that they were operating, and that would be something if it does become revealed that in their little group chat that they have, they were talking about the clock, like it was almost like an episode of 24 or something, like we got to get something done before this clock goes off. But I think that they were actually just so into this trade. Like Pete said, this trade talk has been going on for a while. I know that 1-3 for JT has been in talks for months.
6 months probably.
Exactly. So it's like I know that they're already working at it. I think that it was always just going to be. It was more just a matter of time when the trade was going to be made. I was rooting for it to happen like at that 2-week mark or beyond it, just so I could have ran like a victory lap in the chat or something, because I was promised trades. I thought this trade was going to break as soon as it happened. They're right on my fucking ass. But then I realized that it's because these 3 morons are incapable of like going in the notes app and like just making the trade. Like they need the actual tool in the sleeper app to build the trade so that all 3 of them can conceptualize it. Like if they just like wrote it on a piece of paper and sent it, like they wouldn't be able to figure out like what the trade meant or something. They have to see it in the sleeper format. So that's why they needed the trades to be back open. So that's why I opened the league back up, gave them the opportunity to do that. So I don't think, and maybe Pete can just tell me that I'm wrong, but I don't think that they were really watching the clock when it came to getting a trade out before the 2 weeks passed. I think that it was more just so focused and tunnel vision on getting this specific trade done that really drove it home. Pete, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it was. Listen, I get to say, like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that tanking for a whole year and like continuously talking about the vision doesn't weigh on you. Like, I made my first quote unquote vision trade to make this like insane haul of first round picks September 1st of 2021. That's 16 months of uncompetitive dynasty football. It hurts. It hurts. It gnaws at you. It gnaws at you. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, sitting on all these firsts and getting a full roster of elite talent top to bottom wasn't attractive. Like I was attractive. I was ready to move. I wanted to move. I was definitely chomping at the bit. And I had already kind of committed to move into 1-3 for JT. So like I knew this trade was going to go down eventually. It just kind of depended on like when. And like once I saw my guys and what I was paying for it, I was kind of okay with it. So that's why I went down at the time. But it easily could have gone another 2 weeks, or I could have waited until Stroud was actually drafted, and maybe I could have just got JT for Stroud straight up, and then maybe I don't even go for Pitts, and I'm better off with a guy like Greg Dulcich and then 24 first. But I don't think we really had a clock. I don't really think we had a clock. It was more just like constant discussion for months on end. And then once we all were okay with what we were giving and getting, it went through.
Yeah, one thing to George talking about how George isn't a fan of Kyle Pitts, because I think that there is a discussion to be had about paying the price for a tight end like this, or just kind of playing the lottery with the waiver wire. So I was talking to Simcoe because I do my due diligence. I ask around, I hear some things, and I ask about some price checks on some players, and sometimes I'm truly looking to acquire them. Sometimes I'm just curious where they're at, because I think that anyone can be added to my team at a price that I like, right? Either there might be some guy where at his current price, I say, oh, that guy sucks. But all of a sudden, if his price drops, I might be a little interested in him. And I was asking about Pitts because I was interested in maybe trying to get Pitts back on my team, trying to fill out my starting roster. And, I was trying to make some moves. I've been floating out some packages, to different guys around the league. Simcoe wanted 110, 111, and Ayuk for Pitts. I turned him down. I thought that was much too rich for my blood. That was not the type of move that I wanted to do. I felt like I'm better off holding on to these picks and just trying to, fill out my roster. And, because I felt like, as I was saying about Pete, maybe that was just over consolidating some things, and I'm better off taking these dart throws, and Ayuk's somewhat of a proven thing right now too. I didn't think that was a good move for me at tight end because, like Pete said, he has Dulcich, and who else is it that you have?
I mean, Daniel Bellinger, but
Yeah, but it's like, Dulcich looked pretty good,
Dulcich is
as a
Dulcich is
rookie, and
legit.
especially in that second half. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how I feel right now about Chiggy and even Isaiah Likely, as like a long-term hold. And then I'm hoping that Gesicki can sign with a good team that'll pass to him again, because he was a top 10 tight end when he was getting the targets. So I felt like I was better off just rolling the dice on those three guys and seeing what I could get, because really, once you get past that elite tier of tight ends, which is, it kind of fluctuates from top 3 to 4, maybe 5 some years. But once you get past that, it's like tight end 5 or 6 to tight end 24. They're pretty much the same thing. And, a lot of guys you can get for really cheap. I mean, Dulcich was a waiver wire ad. Chiggy was a waiver wire ad. Likely was a waiver wire ad. And, they might not contribute as consistently and as much as Pitts has right away. And, because people do forget Pitts set the rookie receiving record for receiving yards for tight ends. And, so he had a very good rookie season, just didn't have the touchdowns there. But last year was a little disappointing. And I do think that people maybe are a little unnecessarily low on the Falcons offensive system too. It's like people are just so, Arthur Smith doesn't want to throw the ball. Who's he going to throw it with? He was having Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder take snaps. It's not like he didn't necessarily have Tom Brady throwing the ball for him. I think that once they get their quarterback, whoever that may be, I don't know if they're going to get a guy in the draft. I'd like to see a guy like Jimmy G maybe sign down there. Once they get him, they're going to throw the ball plenty of times. So I think that Falcons offense will still get the ball to Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And, they invested so much in them with those top 10 picks, that they're going to do it. They're going to use these guys. So I do think that maybe the perception of the Falcons offense as a whole is way too low, and they are going to figure it out and bounce back. But yeah, I don't know. Pete, what do you think about, our thoughts on just, paying up for these tight ends? It seems like we're both pretty much against it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking tight end 5. There's no like secret to the tight end situation in the league. You either have Kelsey or Andrews or you don't, and then you're just kind of all the rest. Like you're talking about 5. If you're talking about top 5, you're talking about guys like Goddard, Waller, Kittle, who like did not touch
George has.
Yeah, exactly, but didn't touch the Kelsey Andrews era from the last 2 years. So like I paid for Pitts as if he's going to break into that top 2 in the next 2 years. If he doesn't, then I swung and missed. But I paid for Pitts as if he's going to be the Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews in 2024 and beyond for the next decade. So that's what I believe in. It clearly seems like George doesn't. If he doesn't become that guy, if he just floats around tight end 4, 5, 6, or even worse, it's up to me to move off him, get the recoup of the 2 first that I paid for him back, and then I still feel good about a guy like Dulcich. So I'm not married to Pitts and JT. I do think I can recoup the value I paid for them. So regardless of how you feel about him, I mean, like I don't think you can say I lost this trade getting Kyle Pitts and Justin Jonathan Taylor. You can't say I did. But the two things is like, it does Pitts become that top 2 guy, because that's what I paid for him, and does Bryce Young and Sean Watson pan out over CJ Stroud? That's really what it comes down to for me. George, what do you think about that tight end spiel from the both of us? I'm muted.
Oh shit. You had the picks to swing, and so that's why I was saying earlier is that I respect the swing itself. I just think that the climb, Pitts a receiver. Like let's call, and I know every tight end is essentially, but like Pitts is a receiver. And right. I think the climb to get to, I mean, Kelsey's putting up 300. Kelsey's like a top 10 receiver. Like if you put Kelsey as a receiver, and then you look at, but even to get into the, that 2 spot, you got to be getting like 220 plus, 240 plus a year in points. And his 1,000-yard season year, he was 10 points away from being Hunter Henry. And I know, touchdowns, obviously, if he had caught, 2 or 3 touchdowns there, then he leaps into a bound. But I just think getting into that top 2 is so hard to do that could you have paid a lower price for a receiver that is going to give you, 170 fantasy points, 180 fantasy points, and then just plug and play? Because to your point, if he doesn't, you don't get that differentiation at tight end. Right. And then he's not it's not as valuable. I also think I don't agree that you could get 2 firsts for Pitts, but that could also be because I'm low and I would never pay 2 firsts for Pitts.
Right.
If you can recruit something close to what you got for him, then that's not that, then that's not that bad. But like I said, I think the biggest thing was you had the picks to swing. You took the swing with players that have actually been drafted. And to Kieran's point, the Falcons are committed to throwing the ball to Kyle Pitts. They have no choice. They have to figure out a way to get him the ball because they pass on like 6 cute quarterbacks to take a tight end. So like they need to make that pick look like something that makes sense. Because if Justin Fields is good and Mac Jones is good, that seems like an insane pick that you took a tight end.
Yeah, so George, like to what you were saying about how Pete could, have maybe gone after a wide receiver that could put up the same or maybe even better stats than Pitts. That's how I kind of feel like and of course it's Pete's team. And like I said, there's no denial that he got 2 good players, but I think that it would have been interesting if maybe he went after a receiver to maybe add to some depth and then kept, like we were saying, rolling the dice on these tight ends to just try and get, a playable tight end every week. Maybe doing that and then just seeing and adding to that bench, because even now, I mean, Pete still has the assets that he can use to, if he wants to fill out his bench right now, he pretty much has a full set of picks moving forward, right? He has a 2024 first, and then I think he has somebody else's second and thirds. And then I think he has my first and his first and 25, and then his second and third. So he can still use those to make some moves, maybe even package them with, somebody like one of his flex guys or something to try and upgrade there. I just think that maybe going after a receiver or maybe a running back and trying to get a third running back on the roster or something would have been an interesting move just to see how that would play out for roster construction moving forward. One thing that's interesting that I looked up, though, because we're talking about how George is hating on paying up for tight ends, but he has Kittle. And granted, I believe he got Kittle. Did you get Kittle in the startup draft?
Yep.
So you didn't trade for him or anything like that. You just took him at what I would assume was an average ADP. But if you're looking at all 3 championship matchups in this league's history, right? Andrews defeated Hurst in the 2020 championship. Kittle defeated Fant in the 2021 championship. Last year, we had Kittle versus Kelsey, and we had a tie. So maybe it is worth paying up, because I haven't seen a team with one of these top guys at tight end lose in a championship yet. So Pete might be onto something. I don't know. Pete, did you factor that in when you were going after Pitts, Pete?
No, I didn't factor that in at all. I didn't know that. I've just loved Pitts since he's coming out. I traded like way back in our first rookie draft. I traded the following the next year's first 2 round picks. I think it was like my 22 and my 23 first for the 21 first to get Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts ended up going earlier than that pick, and I ended up with Jalen Waddle. So I'm not too happy, not too disappointed with that. But I've loved Kyle Pitts since he was coming out. I've wanted him. He definitely is my guy. And I paid for him like he's going to be this top guy. So it's just kind of depending on if he does pan out, and if I can get out early enough where I can recoup if he doesn't.
Is there no concern? Is nobody worried about the fact that, I mean, it seems like you guys it's consensus that Bowen is going to take CJ Stroud at 1.03.
Yeah.
Is he aware that there's like 45 teams that need a quarterback, and CJ Stroud could quite literally end up on any team like in the universe? And that plays such a like, from Bowen's perspective, it's just crazy that if you're trading for a quarterback and we see situation, especially this past 2 years, I feel like we've seen more than ever, like where you land. Zach Wilson, Zach Wilson might just be bad at football, but like Trevor Lawrence, right? Like you look at a guy who like wasn't receiving any coaching, and you look like the worst player on earth, and then he gets a real coach and he looks good. Like I just feel like with so much uncertainty around who's going to draft where and where these quarterbacks are going to go and where they're going to land and who's going to be coaching them. If you're set on taking Stroud, and like you said, 1.3 for JT has been in the works for months and months and months, it feels like something where it's like, it feels like something where I'm waiting that out a little bit to see where the rumors are that he's going to land, or wait for an NFL trade to happen just so that I can be sure. Like, and then if he ends up going to a good situation and I end up having to pay a slight extra tax because I waited and now it's clear that he's going to a good situation, I'm okay with that than the risk of him going to like some team that just has a coach that just does not know what he's doing and they fucking burn him, because he is an Ohio State quarterback who we haven't seen Ohio State quarterbacks work in the league anywhere. And we've seen a lot of guys that are supposed to buck that trend and that have still not been good in the league. So I think that, I don't know, what do you guys think about the risk of not kind of waiting it out to see what situation CJ Stroud was going to end up in, knowing that this 1.3 for JT thing was kind of seemed like a foregone conclusion that it was going to happen and that he could have that trade at whatever time he wanted?
Yeah. So with Bowen's side, it's like, I mean, I don't think that Taylor for the third pick, like I think that's a pretty solid deal in my opinion, because if you look at it, right, I think if Jonathan Taylor was in this draft, I think he'd be, a top 3 pick. I think I think it's fair value, right? I think that for Bowen, it just got ugly when he threw Debo into that deal, and I think that he was in too much of a rush to give him up, and then I think he maybe didn't sell him for the price that he should have gotten him for. But yeah, and like I was saying in my statement too, is like Bowen's saying that it's going to be CJ Stroud. Maybe it's a smokescreen, but even just in his head, he better be committed to a guy right now, because I don't think this is a trade he had to make right now, like you were saying, George. I think it would have been worth just waiting and seeing, because even personally, I knew that I knew that Pete was looking for a lot at 1-3, but also with the rise of Levis and Richardson, I'm just becoming more interested in trying to get maybe these 4th or 5th overall picks. And I think that might be tough to get anyways, because I think that Angelo, and then I believe it's Wallace that picks 5th. I think those are 2 guys that need quarterbacks. So they might not necessarily be looking to give those picks up. But I was saying, it's like, I thought that the 3rd overall pick was maybe losing some value, because I don't think that CJ Stroud is head and shoulders as a prospect above these guys. Obviously, anything's in the range of outcomes, and CJ Stroud could be a Hall of Famer, or one of these guys could be a Hall of Famer, and the others could suck. So you never know. But I just think prospect wise, I don't think that Stroud is sticking out above them, to me at least. So I was becoming less interested in trading up for that 3rd pick. So yeah, for Bowen, I just think that he could have waited. I just don't think that he should have gotten involved in this now. I think that they all, just like I said, got tunnel vision, and they were so committed to just getting this deal done that they shut off their view to everybody else. They weren't going to wait for anybody else to get into trade talks and get closer to the season. So yeah, I think Bowen just jumped into this maybe a little too recklessly and gave up a lot, but he could shut all of our mouths if CJ Stroud just steps onto the field day one and just has it. So it really is a big wait and see. I just think that right now he gave up quite a bit.
George, I think it's a great point. I think it's an unreal point, because the 1-3 terrified me, like absolutely terrified me. I put in a good amount of time into like watching the film on these guys, and I loved Bryce Young's film. Loved Bryce Young's film. Think his game absolutely translates to the NFL level. I didn't see that with CJ Stroud as much. Now you get these rumors of like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson going like super high. You've got, just in the first round, you've got Houston, Indy, Seattle, maybe Detroit, Las Vegas, Atlanta, Carolina, Tennessee, Houston again, New York Jets, all in the top 13. Obviously, they're going to sign some free agents at quarterback, but you're right. There's so many places these quarterbacks could go. I couldn't tell the difference between Stroud, Levis, and Richardson. I was terrified of missing. I was terrified of the 1-3. Absolutely terrified of it. I didn't have distinguishable difference between those 3 quarterbacks after Young. I could have let draft capital at the NFL level decide that for me, but I still wasn't comfortable with that either. What if like CJ Stroud goes to like Carolina or Houston, and then like Levis goes to like Indy or Seattle? Great situation, but unproven quarterback. Like, it's terrifying. I loved Bryce Young. I'm positive I'm going to draft Bryce Young. And I felt getting out of the 1-3 to get proven talent at JT, who's 24. Like, I know he's the second contract, but he's still got one more year in his current contract. He's 24. I still think like he's a top 5 dynasty running back in a startup right now. And like that just felt good for me. Like, I was terrified of the 1-3, and I was like, give me JT. That's proven talent. That's top running back and top running back talent in the league right now. And I feel like I've got an elite young core at every single position going forward with, like KB said, all those draft picks in 2 and 25. So yeah, I don't know. 1-3 terrified me. I think it's a great point.
Pete, you've referenced a couple times now the startup value of
Yeah,
many of the players on your team.
Line.
Do you feel like maybe this is like a fresh start for you, and this is like your real start in the league?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I learned dynasty now. If you talk about the vision, quote unquote vision, I sold, going back to September 1st of 2021. I sold Russell Wilson, Mark Andrews, Joe Mixon, Jalen Waddle, and Juju Smith-Schuster. That's Russell Wilson, Mark Andrews, Joe Mixon, Jalen Waddle, Juju Smith-Schuster. Now have, and like, it was very even. Like, those players for these guys: Bryce Young, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, Jameson Williams, Kyle Pitts. So like, that just feels really good to me. Really good to me. Got 7 of 9 starters, like I said, in those top 2 ADPs for startups now, and all my picks. So like, yeah, it feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like a breath of fresh air. I don't think I have the depth to compete for a title this year, but I think I'm on the playoff bubble, and I've got my average starting age is 23. So like, I've got an elite young core with all my picks, and I feel like I can compete going forward.
So you were kind of saying, where do you kind of feel like, what's your expectation going into next year? What are you thinking? So do you think that going into next season right now, you are in the top 6 or the bottom 6?
Bottom 6.
Interesting.
One
And where do you
injury,
feel like
one
you rank in
injury.
that 6?
I still feel like Mikey takes the Gabagool division. I think I'm better than Bowen. I think I'm better than the Suns. If I have a perfect season with no injuries, I do think I can be on a playoff bubble in terms of points for. But I still put myself in the bottom 6. And one injury, like if Bryce Young tears his ACL like Trey Lance did in Game 2, then I'm kind of sunk. Even for bye weeks, I'm kind of sunk. So like, I don't really expect to make the playoffs this year. It'd be nice to make the playoffs, but there's also no moves to make. Like, there's no guys that need to get off of. There's no guys that need to acquire. It's kind of like, hey, the ship's righted now in terms of age and talent. Let's let it roll for the next couple of years.
And what do you think it's really going to take for you to get into that top 6 and then hopefully into that top 3, 2, 1 conversation to chase a title? Like, is it just age? Do you think that these guys just need a couple more years in the league, or do you think that it's more adding that depth that you're clearly missing, or maybe somewhat of a combination of both?
I think it's kind of taking the jump from like the wide receiver 2 levels to the wide receiver 1 levels. Like, I honestly think I have them straight in a row. Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, Garrett Wilson were like wide receiver 19, 20, and 21. One of them needs to take the jump to like top 12 to join CD Lamb, and the other one has to get to like wide receiver 15. And then it comes down to the quarterbacks. Like, I do think Deshaun Watson is a top 12 dynasty quarterback right now. And I think Bryce Young could get there, at least has a ceiling too. So like, if you look at Georgia's team, our 1.5 league champ, like he's got Cup, Chase, and who's your third guy? George, third wide receiver, Smith, Dalmont Smith, and
Diggs.
Diggs. Yeah, Diggs. So you've got 4 wide receivers in the top 23 and the top 10. So like, I've got CD, but I need Garrett Wilson to take that step to top 12. I need Michael Pittman and Jerry Jeudy go from like 22 to like 15, 16, 14. So I think it's not so much acquiring more guys; it's my guys, seizing their potential to get to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, I think right away the one thing that will just hold you back is the depth, primarily at running back, because I think
Right.
Son Haskins is your third running back right now.
Yeah,
And you don't have any other picks in this draft, right? It's not like, so you just have 1, 1, and 1, 2.
Just 1, 1, and 1, 2.
So yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to have to, if you want to have running back depth this year, you're going to have to make some move for that.
Right.
And I don't know if it's worth it for you, because it's like, do you want to make a move like that so you can maybe compete, or maybe you're just better off, because you're probably going to have to get rid of one of those picks, just because even on your bench, you don't really have guys that are, great trade assets. I think Jameson Williams is your only projected playable player. And of course, we haven't really seen much from Jameson, and, just because of last year with the ACL.
He's a rookie.
Coming back. So for the most part, you don't have a bench. So you're really relying on your picks, which is that war chest is kind of no more. You just have a pretty standard set of picks. And then, you'd probably have to either pair it with one of your players to upgrade, or you just have to do maybe one for one swaps, or a first and a second to try and get some of this depth. So that is the only thing that I'm worried about with your team. And it's just one of those where all of a sudden you just see it and you're like, oh, whoa, like all those picks are gone now. It's like so crazy. And like, you're locked into what you have. And of course you could always try and, recoup some value on any of these guys if things don't start going the way that you want it to. But it is just interesting to see you start to actually lock in on something. And it'll definitely be interesting to see how it plays out. And if this is the roster that can, make those necessary steps to get you into that next platform. But I think next year will be an interesting thing to see, if those weeks where everybody's on is enough to carry you and keep you in that discussion, or if the depth will kind of just eat away at you and keep you down in the standings. Especially because I think next year is, a lot more open, with Amaral really being like the only clear tank team. So, George, what else do you got?
Nothing. That was it.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered everything. I mean, if Simcoe or Bowen, they want to come on and plead their case, I think Simcoe will be pretty pleased with what he's heard. If Bowen wants to come on and plead his case, if he wants to call out anybody, maybe he wants to bring George back on the show and say some things about what he had to say. Maybe he just wants to come at me. Maybe Bowen will feel betrayed after hearing my opinion on his side. But Pete, you got anything to close out with?
What Bowen did tell me was that he needed to get out of quarterback purgatory. Like, he hated having Geno Smith and Kenny Pickett last year, and he wanted to get out of QB purgatory. So I think there was definitely like a need to overpay and get CJ Stroud. That's what I think. He wanted to get out of QB purgatory.
Yeah, and I feel that because I'm definitely been just considering it and feeling it out and seeing if it was possible for me as well to try and get one of these high end guys. And those doors definitely aren't shut, but I do think it'll be somewhat unlikely just because of who's holding the picks for a multitude of reasons. But I was kind of feeling that way too. And then Tua took that step last year and saved me. And I've been counting my lucky stars every night. That he's okay and he appears to be coming back, because if that were to knock him out of the league, that might just be a knockout punch to the Slow Stroke Kings. And
I'd hate
put me in hell for
that. I'm right, by the way.
What's that?
I'd hate for that to be the reason that I'm right about Kenny Pickett over Tua.
I think that would just make it a no contest. I don't think that would.
No, I'd be right, but I wouldn't like to be right that way.
No.
Yeah, I'd be right.
Yes, you'd be technically correct, which is they say is the best one to be. But I feel like within the parameters of what we were debating, I think that would rule it a no contest because sample size pretty simple. I was kind of feeling that way too. And then Tua took that step, and I'd love to have Mac take that step with the new coordinator. And, because he was looking very promising as a rookie. I mean, he arguably had the best rookie season with Davis Mills of all people. I mean, we're talking about how Trevor Lawrence and his awful situation year one clearly was holding him back. But, I'd love to see Mac take that step, because if he doesn't, then, that's where I could be looking to get aggressive and try and get somebody. And I feel like I need, a more reliable quarterback 3 anyways. So, I mean, the quarterback market will be interesting. I think that the trade talks for 1-4 and 1-5 will still be ongoing with some teams, because I think people will be looking to get these quarterbacks. I think a lot of people are seeing it and they want to have these 2 strong quarterbacks like we've seen from Pinz or the Vibers, not McMorrow, but, another champion of ours. And maybe at some point the pendulum will swing and more people will say, shit, I just got to get a ton of running backs. That's the way to win. But for now, I think everybody's pretty committed to getting a lot of quarterbacks, and the chase is on. And I think it'll be interesting to see how things go as Levis and Richardson seem to be climbing up the board day by day. So, as we get closer to draft time, as free agency opens up and a lot of these quarterbacks start signing with teams, I do think the actual trade market in our league will heat up a ton. I hope to see a lot of it. But I feel like we've covered everything that needs to be said on this 3-team trade. George, as always, it's great to have you back on. Pete, it's great to see you. It's great to hear your perspective. I hope that you feel like we were pretty positive about your side.
Honestly, I was expecting to be the hyena that was getting surrounded by 2 wolves, and I thought you guys were very fair and gave good points for being. So it was good. I loved it. I was ready for worse.
Yep. So, I do think you got 2 good players. I think it'll be exciting to see what becomes of your team now that you have a full starting lineup at the very least. It's a good start for you. So here's the new beginnings. It is the Lex and Pete show with Pinz this episode, a little throwback, like I said at the beginning. We look forward to talking more as more trades break and free agents start. And I think that now that Bowen has that 3rd overall pick and we've seen some more draft talk coming up, I might start working on a little mock draft. So maybe we'll be back on here next week. Until then, we will see you
later.
How do I